How's everybody doing today? Good crowd. Thanks so much for coming out for our first Clinton panel, and thank you to Skip and Nikolai for continuing this partnership. Everybody at the Rep, we're so thankful for this way to really kick off our opening week for each production. So we've got a great group here today, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and their connection with the show.
Hello. Hello. I'm Melissa Rain Anderson, and I am the director.
Hi, I'm James Lloyd Reynolds. I'm playing King Arthur.
We have a lot of mics.
Hi, I'm Mike DeSalvo, and I am Lancelot, Tim the Enchanter, the French Taunter, and the Knights that say nee.
Hi, my name's Adam Kemmerer. I play Sir Galahad, the Black Knight, and Herbert's father.
Hi, I'm Jessica Eisenberg. I'm the choreographer.
Thank you, guys. Quickly, by a show of hands, who is a Monty Python fan? All right, we've got a good group. You all have your tickets, correct? Yes? Good. For those that are not Monty Python people, Melissa, can you kind of just discuss the creation of Spamalot and where it kind of came from?
Sure. So Spamalot is based on Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which is probably the Pythons' most famous movie. The Pythons are a comedy troupe, sketch comedy troupe, British sketch comedy troupe that became famous late 60s, early 70s. And they had a TV show called The Flying Circus. So they are based in sketch comedy, and Eric Idle, one of the Pythons, actually adapted the book of Spamalot. So it's very true to the movie, which is fantastic. So for the fans, it's a hoot because line for line, you get to hear the famous scenes like the Black Knight scene or the Knights of Ni or the French Taunters. But what's so amazing about the way the show works is that all of those scenes lead really well into a musical moment. So to make it a musical comedy was sort of a genius move in a way, because it's also a great musical for just musical theater fans. And I think the hybrid of, the sort of absurdist comedy of the Pythons versus traditional musical theater comedy hits a really great sweet spot, and that's why it's been so successful over the years.
Can you continue kind of talking about that absurdity and the humor, the difference between that type of humor and American humor? Sure.
Well, they sort of classify themselves as surreal humorists or absurdists. It's a witty humor, it's a verbal humor, as opposed to a visual sort of humor. John Cleese especially was very sort of adamant that they tell the jokes through verbal comedy. Another sort of like trademark of the Pythons is they never really wanted to finish the bit. So when the skit was going awry, they just sort of would all walk off, or John Cleese would come out dressed for dinner and say, and now for something completely different, and they'd just very easily sort of move into the next thing, but they didn't feel pressure, as most American comedians do, to sort of button the bit. So they allowed their comedy to sort of run out of steam and walk off the stage. Now, when we're doing a musical, we sort of can do a nice hybrid of both. So there are moments in the play that the steam just sort of runs out of the comedy, and then we very sort of quickly turn that around and start singing. Or we very quickly turn that around and somebody makes another entrance. One example, I think, is the Black Knight. Adam Kemmerer plays the Black Knight, and once his demise has happened, you don't really button the scene, you just sort of move on into the minstrels in sort of this bizarre twist. Most American comedy is based on vaudeville. So the Marx Brothers being, most successful. And they actually kind of share the same ambiguity as far as allowing each other to do their bits, but there's always sort of a nice button at the end, and we all feel confident that we can move on into the next thing. I think the Brits want to make you feel a little bit more uncomfortable in moments, right? So they're anarchists in a way. It's not traditional. It's not a comfortable moment in the theater. It's sort of odd and quirky and weird, and we all move on. Yeah.
And the Brits, we hosted, for anyone that doesn't know, we host the Thursday before opening week. It's called Behind the Theme, and we discuss various themes within each show. And last week we had Philip Martin, who's the film critic at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and he was talking about how the Brits use humor to talk about real issues, and here it's the plague or a distrust in authority. Can you kind of talk about how there's an intellectual side to it, but it's also silly?
Yes, absolutely. Eric Idle really calls the Python humor intelligent men being stupid. So that's sort of the tagline, you know. They have a quick wit, they're very cerebral, they're very witty, but it's just kind of like 12-year-olds in the backyard sort of just farting on each other. Yet the subject matter can be, you know, they're very social, political. Of course, they're putting down the royalty, anything that has to do with kings, or it's all about class, and, you know, making fun of upper class, making fun of people in charge, sort of boys run amok, I think, is probably a good way to think about it. And I think that they do it really intelligently, so that you can laugh and not be frightened about it. Yeah.
And with that intelligent men being stupid, I want to kind of go to some of our actors really quick. Mike, I want to go to you. These are our men. I want to go to Mike first. We talked in some interviews about how this was the first show that brought you into musical theater, correct? Spamalot?
This is the only musical I've ever done.
Yeah. Can you kind of talk about, and you mentioned the farting. Can you kind of talk about how you get into that playful spirit and kind of where Melissa takes you in the rehearsal process? I know she has a philosophy on that.
Yes. You should always fart joyfully. It makes it funnier, apparently. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I am not a musical theater performer historically. This is the only musical that I've ever done, but so when Melissa reached out about auditioning, I was like, thanks, I appreciate that, but I don't sing. She's like, well, take a look at the material. And I looked at the material and realized that if I didn't audition, my father would be very angry with me because he was the one that introduced me to Monty Python when I was a kid, and I'm lucky in that I get to do a lot of those classic, like Knights That Say Ni and The French Taunter and Tim the Enchanter and Lancelot, a lot of the John Cleese stuff, and it's so well written and it's so language based that it does free you up to be. You can't really be too silly, and you can't be too big because you have that language to ground you, and everything fits together so perfectly that a lot of the rehearsal process was just play and have fun, and if you're having a good time with the language, then the audience is going to have a good time too. And, you know, there's lots of funny accents and funny voices, and farting in people's general direction, all of that.
Melissa, can you kind of talk about... So when we go cast a show, we always go to New York, and you cast in New York, but then a couple of these guys you specifically knew what you wanted them to play. Can you talk about what it's like to cast a show with 16 actors? And I think we counted yesterday, and they play 100+ roles. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about what you're looking for when you're looking for the cast?
Sure, yeah. You can kind of tell somebody who understands the Monty Python humor really right away. So they walk into the room, and we give out scenes for the actors to read, and there's a very specific tone that you can coach, but it has to really live inside of them. So that's one thing that we look for right away is sort of that zany, absurdist, I think that comedy is almost harder to do than dramatic roles because you have to allow yourself to be really vulnerable. It might not get a laugh, right? And controlled comedy, there's nothing worse than controlling comedy. So that vulnerability and that relaxation and that availability to lob up something that might be terrible in the moment, it's that moment of excitement that the audience feels that is happening and all the rest of the actors around you on stage feel that it's happening. And when it succeeds, it's the best thing in the world. So there's a very specific breed, I think, of comedians that understand this material. There's a lot of great actors that come in, but they're just not necessarily Python people. Yeah. I think Mike also said to me when he was looking at the sides, at the scenes that we sent out originally to audition, I think you said, well, I know the French Taunter already. I already know all the lines. So Mike did the production. I directed this show at Jiva Theater Center in Rochester, New York last year, and Mike played his same roles there. And we have a couple other cast members that I brought along, because once you find the guy that's willing to play all those parts and does it so well, I mean, it's really, really difficult to find. It's a very specific thing. But we do have, like, Adam had to read, did you have like 3 different roles you had to read? Because you can't just cast Galahad. You have to make sure that he can also play the Black Knight and that he can play the father in the Herbert scene, and those are 3 humongously different, varied characters. So we're looking for major character actors who can sing and move and also look like knights. So it's a really tough thing to find. Luckily we were in New York and we found it. But yeah, and also, the ensemble is the same thing. They all have to be character actors. They have to dance and sing, and they have to be beautiful dancers, but they have got to be actors and really, put themselves out there, because it truly is an ensemble piece. I mean, at any point in the show, every single one of them is holding the ball. And the ensemble's working their tails off, running around in quick changes and coming right back on stage. But each one of them has such a very specific contribution to the show. So we had to be really careful casting them as well.
Jessica, can you kind of talk about that and the casting of working with all of the dancers, but especially with working with the ensemble as character actors?
Sure. Yeah. When you see the show, the ensemble, they work so hard. They are in every single number and they're dancing their faces off, which is fantastic for them. It's fun. They are so busy. So when Melissa and I cast the show, not only do they have to be fabulous dancers and be able to do so much, but they have to be actors and they have to make silly choices and feel free to make silly choices. And I did the show last year with Melissa, and I was in the ensemble, and it is a special show to be a part of. It's a show where you get to be free and you get to be silly. I've worked so hard as a dancer all my life, and then you get to be part of a show where you kind of just you get to let it go. So we look for that when we're casting. You got to point your feet and you got to do everything that a dancer has to do, but we're looking for, can you be silly? Can you make choices? And we allow them to do that in the audition room. What we choose to give them allows them, can we see, are they going to bring that out? So it's fun. It's fun.
How many of them are from here?
This question was how many from the ensemble are local?
I think 2, right?
Yeah, Sydney and Garrett. Yeah, but the rest are from New York City. Yeah.
One aspect of the show that we've talked about is how fast-paced it is. You said that in the first full run-through, you were shocked at how quickly the first act went. But as quick as the show is moving, these guys are moving so quick to move in and out of costumes and roles. Can Jessica or the guys or anybody talk about, that quick movement and just always going?
I actually think that helps the comedy, because nobody has a chance to sit backstage and think, oh, what am I going to do now, or how am I going to present this? Like, there's no time. You slap on your costume, or people slap it on you, and you run out there and you do your bits. And so you just have to give yourself over to it, because if there's no time to sit around and think, oh, what can I change of this today, or what can I do differently, or overthinking this show would be a detriment to it, the script.
Jessica, does it in any way shape your work?
Sure. I mean, I think a show that is so fast-paced, it's almost a blessing for them. It's just what Adam said. I mean, I think for everyone in the show, as soon as the show starts, you are shot out of a cannon, and it's go. But it's fabulous. And yeah, you don't have time to second guess, oh, I should have done that, because you have to move on to the next bit. But I think it's a wonderful thing, and it just keeps everyone on their toes. It keeps it exciting and fast-paced and wonderful.
One of the things in the rehearsal hall that Jessica and I were really adamant about is we wanted to get the show into their bodies really quickly, so that they were a well-oiled machine, because we knew that when we hit the theater, we rehearse in a rehearsal hall, and then we move into the theater, and all the moving pieces happen. I wanted them to feel that they could do the show in the parking lot. You know, no matter what was coming at them, they knew exactly where they were at any given time. And I think it really helped the tech process, because when they run off stage and dressers are throwing clothes on them, it's easy to get flustered in those moments as an actor. But I think because they were so familiar with where their body and where their breath and where their humor was, that they could do that, assimilate, move back on stage, and we still had a well-oiled machine. I mean, the first act runs like 48 minutes, but it feels like a half an hour. I mean, we get to the French Taunter scene, and we're like, oh, okay, we're there. You just get on the roller coaster and hold on. And that's what we wanted for the audience, too. We wanted that feeling for the audience.
And with the show being a comedy, the audience is very important. I know that we did an invited dress last Sunday because you guys wanted to see that reaction. Can you guys kind of talk about what you get from the audience?
Yeah, I mean, it changes everything. We think we know what we're doing in the rehearsal hall, and we do. And then you get in front of an audience. Last night we had a fantastic pay what you can night, and they were with us from the very first joke, and people were talking back to us from the audience, and yeah, it was really fun. But the audience is the last piece, and we fully expect that this audience is going to be right with us, and they're going to have a terrific time. But it definitely is. It's just the thing you can't anticipate, and it's what makes live theater so exciting for us and for the audience, because it changes every single night slightly. Yeah.
Well, especially with this show, from night to night, like some nights you're going to have like a really heavy Monty Python crowd that are going to laugh at things before they even come on stage, because they know they're coming on stage. But then other nights you're going to have predominantly musical theater guys that are going to laugh at the musical theater jokes and the references and the singing, and the energy is always different and always changing and always great, and you're just never quite sure.
I heard somebody laughed last night. I don't want to give things away, but somebody laughed at the kind of the first big ballad, because the first lyric is, "This is the song that goes like this," and nobody in Monty Python's world would, because it's not a joke from the movie, but it's, if you know musical theater, it's, okay, I get that. And so there was.
James, you're holding the mic. I kind of want to talk to you about your role. Has its silly moments, obviously the whole show does, but yours is a little bit more serious. You play King Arthur. Can you kind of talk about being in that world?
Well, my character spends the entire show being made fun of, basically. I mean, talking about aristocrats and class, he's the foil for pretty much every scene that he's in. And I take it as seriously as possible. Mike made me break last night during the Tim scene. But you just have to, you go out there and you know that that's your role. And to those who know, Graham was so amazing in the movie. So often when I'm going to do a role like that's based on something, a movie or something, I don't watch the movie before, but in this case, of course, I watched it over and over again because you have to. And he was just so great because he was so serious about every single thing that he did, but not too much and over the top. One of the things that Melissa encourages, is there's no room for meanness. There's no room for negative in a comedy, especially this comedy. And I think we've all learned a great deal about that from her. Yeah.
I have to say, as an actor, watching James work every night has been a learning experience and something I'll take with me when I leave here, because he's essentially you in the play. He's the audience. He's going through the same things that you guys are, and at the same time, he's still zany enough to live in the world where he can be riding a coconut horse on stage, and it doesn't seem weird. So like, it's I think you're in for a treat when you get to see him do his thing.
It's true. No, it's great to have him because he is a true leader, and the discipline with his comedy trickles down through the entire cast, and so we're really lucky to have sort of a very solid base as our King Arthur, and to see the show through his eyes is a perfect way to put it. Yep.
James mentioned seeing the movie and knowing the humor. You've talked about your dad introducing you to it. Can you guys talk about playing these iconic roles, and if that influences what you do, or if you bring something, what you bring to those roles?
Sure. I mean, I have some lines that you really don't have a choice. You have to do it the way John Cleese did it because everybody's waiting for it. And if you don't deliver, I fart in your general direction, at least in the neighborhood of what John Cleese was doing, people are like, I missed it. So I feel like there is somewhat of a responsibility to hit certain lines. But I mean, but there's also room to play with everything else because they have filled it out and there's so much of it. But I feel like that's part of your responsibility with something this iconic is, you have to give a little bit of what you're expecting, but then other stuff you have room to play too. So, for me,
I agree. I haven't watched the movie since I was maybe 12 years old, and I didn't go back to it because I wanted the memory I have in my head as a 12-year-old watching Monty Python to have free reign in my body when I approach this material. So there is enough leeway in the additions of the musical theater elements to the show that you can deliver it the way you think that they delivered it in the movie, but still have some flexibility to bring something fresh to it that is lovely as an actor to sink your teeth into every night.
Melissa, can you talk about the role that Carol Ann plays that people won't know from the film?
Sure. So in Spamalot, there's a character called the Lady of the Lake, and she basically plays all of the women. She's one woman, but she kind of takes on a lot of different roles that King Arthur needs along his journey. It is truly a hero's journey, right? So he starts off, he understands his quest, and then he gains friends along the way, and they solve the mystery of the Holy Grail. Carol Ann's role, the Lady of the Lake, ushers in help along the way. She's also sort of the diva character. She's definitely the musical theater concept, or what's the word I'm looking for? The piece, she's a mode of musical theater. So she can be anybody that we need at any given time. She is ridiculously talented. Her voice is off the charts. She has to re-warm up at intermission because the way she has to sing Find Your Grail is very different than her next song coming up. So it's a tour de force role for a female to play, and she's absolutely brilliant in it. And I told her on the first day, I said, you can't really be too big. And I think that kind of scared her. But it also allowed her freedom, because she she doesn't always get to play these kind of roles. She's just kind of coming into this part of her life where she gets to play these huge diva roles. And at the end, of course, there might be a happy ending there with Lady of the Lake. There's a weird joke at the end about her being Guinevere, but it doesn't really make sense in our production with Lancelot, who he is, and stuff like that. But the audience loves it anyway. It is the Arthur myth sort of turned on its head. They picked and chose what worked for them and what didn't. So she's not a witch, as in the movie. But she does represent the female. It's nice to have a female that can play with the boys and hold her ground as a true comedian in what she does.
And she's part of that focus that the show has about making commentary on the entertainment industry. Jessica, can you kind of talk about your connection to the show and how you're part of that entertainment industry?
Sure. So in the second act, there is a wonderful and hysterical number that Sir Robin sort of narrates. It's called "You Won't Succeed on Broadway If You Don't Have Any Jews." Now, the amazing part of this number, I come from a very theatrical family. My mother was a dancer on Broadway and a stage manager, and my father is a recently retired Broadway producer, and he is a very successful man in the business, has won many Tony Awards and many successful shows, and my last name is Eisenberg, so he's a Jew. So the song, the number, is very much in reference to him. But I have to say, when we came to rehearsals and setting that number, it was sort of special to stage a number. As funny as it is, it was about him. So that was kind of special and really awesome how it all sort of trickles down.
We have two members of our lady creative team. Can you talk about Emily and her role as music director?
Emily is our musical director, and she musically directed it on the road. She did the tour for a couple of years, so she really understands Spamalot inside and out. It was really lucky that we got to hire her because Jess and I know it pretty well, but she knows it exactly. But there's a 4 count there, and we can fill that in. So it's great because coming from this show is really hard to unpack. It's a beast. It's humongous. So having some history with it helps. But yes, we are an entirely female creative team, choreographer, director, and musical director, and our production stage manager is also female. So there are 4 women at the helm of this production that's primarily male-driven and male-driven humor. So that was interesting. I do a lot of comedies with a lot of men, so I feel like I'm corralling cats a lot. But but it's fun. There's nothing better than great comedians doing their work. But yeah, we were really lucky to have Emily on this because the score is really interesting. There's a lot of sound effects and odd cat noises and goat sounds and weird things that have to come out of keyboards. They actually come out of the pit. They're not necessarily a sound effect. So it's inside of the music. We have to create all this zaniness as well. So she knew it really well and really helped our process.
And another way she really helped the process was because she came from the national tour. This show is massive. Anyone that knows Spamalot knows how big of a show this is. And to be able to do it the way that we would want you all to experience is that we rented the national tour package. So the sets and the costumes and the props, they came from the national tour. We've been working on them since May. But can you kind of talk about, there's a little bit of magic, stage magic, that some of these pieces have and why it's been helpful to have that package?
Sure. There's so many bits. It really is a cinematic piece because it is based on a movie. And so there's so many bits that there are props, there are pieces of the set that have to work a very specific way. One would be, the Black Knight fight. He has to lose all of his limbs. So that's difficult to try to design. But because we were lucky enough to have the package, and I think that, Arkansas Rep was so smart to say, listen, it's a huge show, we can't build it in this specific amount of time. The magic comes with the show. So we have the Black Knight rig that we learn how. There's a character in the very end of the show where his head has to fall off. Well, last night the head fell off before the bunny even attacked him,
Surprise!
It was hilarious. It was still hilarious. And everybody just sort of went with it on stage. And it was like, whoa.
End up in the front row.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Somebody caught it in the front row. So, kooky audience participation. You might catch a head if you go see Spamalot. But yeah, so there's a ton of tricks like that would just take forever to try to figure out on our own. And Spamalot it opened on Broadway in 2005. It was so successful. There have been millions and millions and millions of dollars in time and hour and energy put into figuring out how to work this show. It was a joy and a luxury to have this stuff already worked out. A man gets hit by an arrow on stage, so to have that arrow rig from day one in rehearsal, and we just go flip, and there's that arrow, informed us immensely. It's really, really fortunate to have all of it right away.
And you brought in another member of the creative team, the lighting designer that brought in the projections. Can you talk about how they impact the show?
Sure. Well, I think because it is based on a movie, the original production of Spamalot had several projections, and so we are using projections, which is great. I didn't have that on my last production, and I think it really adds to the flavor of the piece. In the film, the Terry Gilliam cartoons, sort of transition us from scene to scene. It's one of those Python kind of classic transitions. If they don't know how to get out of a bit, just put a Terry Gilliam cartoon up on stage and we'll get to the next bit. And I think having the projections really adds that sort of feel to it. And we're using the original Terry Gilliam, a la Terry Gilliam cartoon look for the feet of God. God has to appear. He has to show Arthur the Grail. Things that are sort of impossible to do unless you can use projections. So that's been great to have Nathan. And he's done the show before. He did the show at the Muni. And so he was familiar, for a lighting designer, he was familiar with how fast-paced it was going to be, because it's a ton of cues. So it's a ton of lighting cues. I think we have 400. And then plus the projections on top of that. So it's a lot of work to be done in 2.5 days of tech on stage for him. But so we're glad to have him.
We also brought in DC Wright as our fight choreographer. Can you guys kind of talk about working with DC and the physicality of some of your moments?
Yeah, I mean, DC had I think he already had kind of a plan, which was great, because we only had
2 days?
2 rehearsals with him, maybe 2 or 3 at the most, Adam and I. He came in and he was very prepared, and he taught us, because Adam and I hadn't, either one of us, I certainly hadn't done sword work since grad school, maybe, a long time. So he was great, because he went through the basics again with us, and the form is more important, and the story, the audience you can't go too fast, because you want the audience to stay with you, and you want the story to be told, and all of that, safety first and foremost. And then the zaniness of course, what the scene is about, for those of you who know it. Anything else?
Yeah, he helped us choreograph specific moments to make the fight look like a fight that people in the audience would want to enjoy. And so I think it's easy to take in that this is an actual fight that's happening, and yet on stage we feel very safe and controlled. It was nice to hear him say, as someone who hasn't had a lot of fight training, like, take your time with it, you don't have to move too fast, it reads better if you're slow and thorough. It helped, very helpful.
And Melissa kept reminding us that it doesn't really matter what happens, because the audience is going to laugh at it anyway.
Right. Yeah, they're in on the joke right from the start.
Before we move to questions from the audience, I kind of want to go through and let everybody, I know that yours has been changing, but favorite moments from the show. I know that, Melissa, your favorite moment's been
No,
going back.
my favorite moment is always
set now?
Tim the Enchanter. It's the weirdest one, and Mike does a great job at it, and the scene between Tim the Enchanter and the King is absolutely my favorite. And then the killer bunny comes on, a bloody bunny attacks a human on stage. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Holding to it.
And I'll tell you, if you come see the show, stop by the selfie station in the lobby, because there's a killer bunny you can take a photo with. So you can have your own experience.
I know we've talked about flatulence a lot today, but I think my favorite moment is starting to be when, in the French Taunter scene, Mike does a bit as an elevator. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that, and you'll know what I'm talking about.
I got to keep the elevator bit in for a little while. I think Tim is probably my favorite character to play because he's just so serious about his rabbit warning. But as an actor, I think my favorite moment is the Find Your Grail song, because I love musical theater, and I've loved musical theater for so long and never imagined I would ever be in a musical. Because I really just don't sing, and when you come see me dance, you'll understand more. And the Find Your Grail, it's this big gospel, giant Broadway ballad, and I'm just up there with everybody else, and it's just, the music swells, and it's always I love it. It's one of my favorite parts.
My favorite moment of the show is when James sings "I'm All Alone," because it's there's this freight train from the start of Act 2 of zaniness and some moments that almost feel like they've taken us out of the show into a different world of Herbert and all that weird stuff that's happening, and then it's just one zany thing after another, and then he sort of reins us back in and says, like, okay, like, grabs control of the narrative of the show once more, and it's just my favorite moment because it brings everything, I think, nicely back into where we're going to live and where the rest of the show is going to sort of and where we're going to end our arc of the production.
I think it's hard for me to find a favorite moment in the show. Being in it last year at Jiva, I think I agree with you, Mike. Find Your Grail is really a special number. I think this time around, now staging all the musical numbers, I think my favorite part about it is watching it every night and watching these wonderful actors make new choices, become more comfortable in the show and finding new laughs and watching them grow as actors and watching them make choices and that they make me laugh every single time. I mean, Tim the Enchanter will always make me laugh, and I've seen it about 50 times now. But the same lines still manage to make me laugh. So I don't think I can pick a favorite moment. I think I love the show as a whole, and I love to watch all of them.
I'm going to move out now to, oh, great. We've got a question from the audience.
All of you on the stage are too young to remember, but I saw Tim Curry and David Hyde Pierce on Broadway in this play, and the great thing about it was their comedic timing, which I'm sure. Do you set your clock to someone else's timing since the movie and the play are so popular, or do you set your own clock? And as a director, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm a little older than I look. No, I loved the Broadway version. Loved David Hyde Pierce. I think he's brilliant. So the thing about the movie, the thing about the Spamalot is that it's not a movie, right? So we can't close in. We can't do a close-up shot. So if the movie rides if the comic timing of the movie rides at a really sort of dry 6.5. We are always building to a musical number, so we have to be riding at an 8, or else it doesn't work in the true musical comedy sense. We have to be, our energy has to be revving a little higher. So it's this great calibration that these actors do of maintaining the authenticity of these characters and the dry wit of the pythons, but it's just a tad heightened so that the musical comedy makes sense. So I'm kind of the keeper of that, I guess. You know, I'm sort of the wrangler of that, of like, and it's great because when we set the tone from the top, if I say to one of them, hey, we went just one tick out, they feel it right away. They can feel their motor revving. You guys want to talk about that?
I think it's also knowing, with this kind of humor, it's knowing when you have the setup and when you have the punchline. And so just kind of going through and realizing, oh, this isn't about me, this is about setting up James, and then he gets the laugh. And then knowing when, okay, I have the laugh line, so he knows to set it up in a certain way. And finding that rhythm and having live audiences helps, because if the rhythm is off a little bit, you won't get the laugh. And then you kind of use the previews to kind of figure out, oh, this is where it lives in terms of rhythm and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes? A microphone's coming really quick.
We were fortunate to see the show on Broadway a number of years ago also. And I think my favorite scene was I'm Not Yet Dead. Do one of you play that?
He's not here today.
Okay.
Yeah.
He is hysterical.
Which is a great, and it's a great show. And if those of you who haven't seen it, you will be laughing the whole time. But that particular scene, I still remember all these years later.
Any other questions?
Have any of you been to Little Rock before? And what do you think of our city?
I was here last year. I directed The Little Mermaid at the Rep.
Of course, we brought her back, yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention that, yes.
No, I had a great time at the Rep, and I was really happy that Bob and Cliff had me back for Spamalot. It was different weather when I was here. It's a little warm. No, we've been having a good time. We've explored a little bit, and these guys are staying. Jess and I leave on Saturday after the show opens, but they'll get to explore a little bit more. We went to the distillery.
You had a good night at the Travelers game.
Oh yeah, we went to the baseball game.
Played every game.
We saw Dolly Parton.
Pinnacle Mountain, yeah.
Climb Pinnacle.
Yep.
Carney, did you have a question?
Just wondered whether or not, just a minute, Carney, let me get you a
Carney,
mic.
he's going to bring you the.
We are taking. Oh. If I go tonight and I go again Saturday night, am I going to see the same show?
Well, you want to talk about your improv section?
About what?
Your
Your improv.
improv section?
Oh, yeah, well, there's a
moment in the play.
There's a moment in the play where it's sort of audience participation. Somebody gets pulled up on stage, and that's going to be obviously different every night. It depends on the audience. You're going to see the same show, but depending on how vocally involved the audience is on any given night, it's going to change up a little bit. But it is so tight. First of all, the show is built so tightly. There's not an imperfect moment, I don't think, in the construction of the show itself. And then Melissa has formed a production that is as tight as the construction of it is in its basis. So it's a well-oiled machine. And that's not to say that there's not room for expansion of humor and breadth and all of that. But it's a incredibly well-oiled machine for where we are, ready to open on Friday. Yeah.
I think what I would tell you, though, having seen it a couple times in rehearsal, is the reason you're going to want to come back and see it multiple times is there's so much going on the stage between these guys and the ensemble and the dancing and all the props. You could come 4 or 5 times and catch something different every single time. So I would recommend come this week, come for opening week, but buy another ticket and come again, bring other friends with you, but watch different parts of the stage because it's so fast moving, you're going to miss one little part and be sad you didn't see it.
It's true. The show's sort of a treat for the eyes and the ears, as she's saying. We have there's people jumping off of tables and wearing heavy costumes, so we and dancing and tap dancing, so we have a company masseuse, and he's legally blind, and I was speaking with him about his level of enjoyment for watching theater, because since he can only appreciate it auditory. So he was saying, you know, there's some shows that I really like, but I was thinking this is actually a great show for him to enjoy to his fullest ability because he'll just love the language of it. So one day you can enjoy the language of it, and then the next day you'll be able to enjoy the visual of it too.
Did you have a question?
You know, I saw.
Let's grab this microphone really quick.
You said you watched the movie. I saw months ago Shakespeare in Love in Canada, Stratford, Shakespeare. Yeah, we go every year. I like it. It was comedy. And then when we came back to US, me and my husband said, let's watch the movie. But then I said, no, I didn't like the movie. Movie was fake, but the play was real. You know, I mean, I really, you know, I said, no, I want to go back again, see it. And I said to him, why they don't bring it in, New York? But about you, when you watch the movie at first, you were not worried to be fake like a movie when you play on the stage? I mean, I don't want to watch the movie. I want to see the play because for me, you know, over there, you don't see the same every night. It's different, but the movie is fake. You don't want to look at it again. But, I mean, what was your feeling when you watched the movie at first?
Well, I think that because so many people know the Python skits, and those characters are so iconic, that in this particular show, it's important, as Mike said earlier, to nail at least a close approximation of who these people are, because otherwise you're going to disappoint anybody who's seen the movies, because the movies are so funny. That's not to say that we all don't bring our individual personas and personalities to these roles, but I think I knew that for me particularly it was important to learn more because I didn't know that much about Monty Python. My sisters were bigger fans of them growing up than I was, so I thought it was more important for me to just get a better sense of who they were and what the style of their comedy was. Yeah, but there's enough differences in the movie and the musical. Yeah. I think people feel that way about movies when they've read the novel too often, right? It doesn't, or vice versa. It depends on which one you see first, yeah.
And the beauty of seeing shows in our space and the difference between watching it on your TV or watching it in the movie theater is that you're part of it. You know, they're feeding off your reaction, and we have a 377 seat house, so it's very intimate, but you're right there. You're right part of the action. So for those who have seen the film, come see it in a whole new way. You know, you're right there, and it's just such a great way to be able to see these moments that you love come to life.
And just your question about are they going to bring Shakespeare in Love to New York? I know Disney, you know, it was a Disney film. Was it a Disney-produced film?
I don't know.
Or Disney had produced it in London, the play version, but there's like 28 or 30 actors in it, and it's a straight play. It's not a musical. So that is just really tough to produce. Yeah?
I mean, it's a serious thing, part of it.
Yeah.
Great.
That's great. That's good. Well, hopefully they will.
See you next week.
Okay, you do that. I'll get it here. I'll bring it here.
I mean, it's
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to cut it short because we've got a couple people that we want you guys to meet, but thank you all so much. I know that I'm getting, well, there's another person I'd like to introduce really quick. So you've all met John Miller, Stephanie, but I'd like for Anna Kimmel to stand up in the back. Ooh. Anna is our new Director of Education. She comes to us from Roanoke, Virginia. She just got here this week. So we're really excited to have her here at the Rep with us. for you all, you probably historically know that our education has been for kids, for young artists. We actually have opportunities now for you all to be part of the teaching fun. Anna is looking at everyone and saying yes, yes. We have adult acting classes, so this is the first time that we are expanding our education with Fall at the Rep to include youth and adults. So if you want to just get the acting bug, you see something on our stage and you want to come learn from Anna and her team, go to therep.org and see what classes we have open right now. I'm sorry that I did not realize that they'd introduced you guys. Do we have any more questions since we have more time? Does anybody have a question? Fran, yes. Sorry, I didn't realize they'd done that.
Sorry, I do have a quick question. This is such a complicated show. You guys have talked about that. And you only have 3 weeks together with Melissa and with the design team to rehearse. How do you come together and get to a point where you know each other well enough and trust each other well enough to do this show together, to make it work?
I'll answer quick and then I'll let Adam add on. I try to bring together a family sort of right away. So first of all, the actor housing helps because they all live together in this big apartment complex and it's very communal. But Jess and I tried to set the tone of an ensemble piece right away, family right away. I do a lot of research on actors before I hire them to make sure that they'll be good people in the room. And with a piece like this, it's just so important that they can trust each other implicitly right away.
That's it. She said it. She found a group of people who there's not a diva in the bunch, and we all like each other from day one. And she also, the person playing Not Dead Fred, no, I'm not dead yet guy, Jacob, is sort of our cruise director, if you will. And he's facilitated some very fun evenings between the cast, so we bonded from the day we got here.
Well, thank you all so much for coming today.